I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes. Sunbathing Animal was my first intro to Parquet Courts back in 2014. And in my rather amateur analytical way, I was trying to work out why that record hit me so hard. And I realized that, and you'll have to bear with me, kind of sonically, they really sort of squared with my own sort of music evolution, from the, kind of melody and nihilism of the Velvet Underground and the Ramones through to the post-punk of the Fall, the Raincoats, and then the kind of the discordance of Sonic Youth. But they sort of threw it forward into the sort of the present day. And the other thing was, like, sort of emotionally, it kind of resonated with some of the things that I often felt as I was growing up, sort of like nervousness, paranoia, kind of nonchalance, panic, some urgency to life. So they were a band that I could really relate to. They lived in New York, which I loved. Their artwork was very distinctive. And also they sounded like music fans. And they're a band that's experimented with sound, brought in their influences, collaborators, and with their latest, an 8th studio album, Sympathy for Life, they pushed the boundaries yet again. And it's a wonderful record. So with that bluster thankfully over, it's a huge honor to welcome songwriter, musician, and artist Andrew Savage to the show. Andrew, welcome, and thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Giles.
Not at all. I'm really tired after doing that intro. So let's. What's the latest record? What's the kind of the response been so far? Are you happy? Are you happy with the response that you've had?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I can't really gauge that beyond how people have responded live, which has been great.
Yeah. And of course, you just sort of gone back out on tour. I think you're just sort of in between dates at the moment as we're recording this.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we were just out. We were just out for a couple of weeks. We did some dates with our friends, PE from New York, and also Public Practice from New York, and we'll down to Texas Public Practice next week, and then we're gonna do a Mexico City show. And then that'll be it for the year. But next year it really starts the touring.
Yeah, I mean, I first saw you. It was on the Sunbathing Animal tour in London, 2014. It was kind of like, I think it was at the University of London.
Oh yeah.
That show. Yeah. Which was so that was again sort of like my first live intro to you, which was like an incredible show.
That show was really fun. I remember it.
Yeah. It's a good venue. So like kind of going back to I'm always sort of interested in kind of formative influences.
Okay.
Kind of so going back to when you were a kid. What were your sort of formative influences that sort of led into the mindset that you have now?
Define kid, because I feel like I just recently stopped being one.
Maybe kind of single digit age, if you can go back.
Yeah, sure. We're talking about kind of my awakening into rock and roll.
Yeah, and also I'm also interested in the art as well, which I think is fabulous and extremely distinctive.
Well, my awareness of bands kind of starts with a lot of people's, and that's the Beatles. So that was my first awareness of a band that had a name, that had songs that I knew and liked, and that was my first awareness of, okay, I like that band.
Yeah.
But I think my first awareness of current rock music would have been in the mid 90s. and that would have been through Oasis and Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
Because I think it was 95 that both Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness came out, and definitely Maybe came out.
Yeah.
And I was old enough to have loved both those bands based off of their music videos that were on MTV. There was a show called Rude Awakening that came on before school on MTV, and the Don't Look Back in Anger video and the Tonight Tonight and Bullet with Butterfly Wings videos were really kind of heavy rotation on there, and so those were the first two. Like, I mean, the first CD I bought with my own money was probably, I don't say probably, I know it was Rod Stewart, Vagabond Heart. But those were the first times that I knew that there was a band that I liked and they were about to drop a new CD and I wanted to get it right away. So that's kind of like the first time that I found two bands that were, you know, currently active, that were huge, and I wanted to be a part of it, you know. So that's where that begins. You know, with art, it's less easy to put a like a 0 year on that, because I just always have drawn, even before I was into music, which also happened quite young. But before that, I was into drawing, making pictures, and I don't really ever remember not being interested.
Not doing
in
that. Was
I do remember life before being really interested in music, but I don't really remember life before being really interested in art.
Were the people that you kind of grew up with, are you sort of parents or carers that you know were interested in music? Because like my parents, for example, I mean my dad was sort of classically trained, and he was you know, and he kind of guided me into playing the cello when I was a kid. I think I was like 8 years old or something, and that was my first intro into kind of music.
Well, I grew up in a household with a lot of music. My parents played a lot of music, but neither of them are musicians. I didn't really have I didn't have an older brother. I didn't have an older sibling. I didn't really have any kind of person who was like, "Hey kid, check this out." I got into
same with me.
I got into everything out of my own curiosity, which I had a ton of. And I, you know, that kind of 90s alternative radio rock interest it turned into punk because there was a kid at my junior high. So this would have been like 6th grade. I would have been like 11, 12. And there was a kid, he was a punk, and he had spiky hair. He had, you know, patches sewn on. You know, I knew vaguely of punk, but I mean, there were just, I didn't know he had, you know, he had Dead Kennedys, and all these great kind of visual logos that I thought were so cool and so mysterious. And, you know, he had the Black Flag patch. And so, you know, that kind of, I would go to the music store and I'd look for those CDs. And so I got into punk, and then I got into Maximum Rock and Roll, which, you know, is a zine, a punk zine that ran from 1980, I think, to just recently, just a few years ago, they stopped. And once I got that, because, you know, I was listening to, you know, Black Flag, Minor Threat, Dead Kennedys, you know, The Damned, the stuff that you could get at, you know, a major CD store, you know. The usual suspects, Misfits, Ramones, you know the idea. But once I got tapped into Maximum Rock and Roll, which that would have been 99 or 2000, was all of a sudden tapped into this kind of global DIY punk and hardcore scene that was happening everywhere, that was special to me because nobody at my school, none of my peers knew about this, you know. And it was just mine, and it connected me with the world, really. And then I learned the magic of sending $3 cash in an envelope and getting a 7-inch a month later.
Oh, wow.
Then at that point, I was just kind of hooked. And so I got really into hardcore. And that kind of defines high school. And that kind of defines ages like, you know, 13 to, I don't know, 23 for me. Which was just hardcore. I played in hardcore bands. And it wasn't until the end of that era I just mentioned that I really got into, you know, indie rock, which is definitely, I guess most people would argue, what the milieu that Parquet Courts is in. For sure, we're not a hardcore band, and most people would agree that we're a punk band, I think. But that is where I come from, and that's, you know, that's a lot of people that I know is like kind of foray into rock music is through similar things. And so, you know, eventually I start going to house shows and DIY space shows. There was a place in Fort Worth, Texas called 1919 Hemp Hill that was a, you know, DIY kind of, you know, squat like kind of situation. And I spent a lot of time there. I met a lot of friends there. I made a lot of friends like through the scene. And, you know, put out my own band's hardcore record in high school. And then eventually, I start getting into, I guess, kind of more indie kind of stuff. But also, like, you know, I started like the first indie band I had, Teenage Cool Kids. We kind of were an indie band that played on the DIY punk scene, you know. So it was still very much in that kind of world. So I guess that's a brief history of my interest in music.
I'm interested. You said that it felt like something that you owned when you first got into it, because nobody else at the school was kind of into that. That's an interesting one. That it's almost like, I mean, did it feel like you know, it was your own identity? You know, I'm actually kind of really interested in this sort of like ever evolving identity.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a really crucial thing for a teenage person is to have an identity that is unique. It's like it's very important to like kind of distinguish yourself, I think, mentally for a lot of kids. I mean, I guess, you know, for a lot of kids it's, you know, that maybe it's the opposite. It's being on like a, you know, a sports team or, you know, something. But that wasn't my deal, you know. So it was important to me to have like very much my own thing, because there were like, you know, there were kids that I went to school with that were into like, you know, I guess what they considered to be like punk or something, but it was, you know, more like, you know, stuff like, I don't know, NoFX and the Vandals. And you know, I was a very like alienated kind of little asshole that was like, that shit sucks. Like, I listen to real shit. You know? Like, I listen to fucking Crass and
you're into the proper stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I remember like when I was probably that 11 to 13 and sort of going into the, you know, into the local record shop. And I grew up in a sort of smallish town. It's got bigger as the years have gone by. It's sort of quite a small town, and seeing it was, you know, sometimes it was the artwork, you know, the front cover of the vinyl artwork. You know, kind of bands like Killing Joke, Susie and the Banshees, and then kind of Adam and the Ants that had this sort of. It almost seemed like another world. It was like a world that felt completely different to the environment that I was in. And of course, a lot of this was sort of happening in London. I grew up in the north of England, and then it's like, but I wanted to be kind of part of that, you know. It's like, and get buying those records was kind of the way for me to do it, you know. But you obviously sort of went further and picked up instruments.
Yeah, I to start my first band, I like kind of, you know, bullied some of my friends into starting a hardcore band with me. They were just like, you know, I think they were just like, they knew they wanted to play in a band, and, you know, wanted to be loud and angry. And so, you know, I tried to be pretty evangelical about hardcore when I was a kid, but, you know, ultimately I think a lot of my friends just wanted to, you know, rock out, and and none of them were as like serious about it as I was. And so like, once I got to university, I kind of found some people that were really kind of into being in like a band as like their life, you know.
What did I mean with those sort of people that you were sort of surrounding yourself with? What did they kind of give you? What you know? What was that sort of experience of hanging out with those sort of people, as opposed to, you know, sort of others that perhaps weren't into that sort of music or that sort of lifestyle?
Well, it's kind of like we're talking about, you know, the identity of young people. You really, I mean, I did anyway, and I think a lot of people, I still see this happening with, you know, with teenagers, is that you really kind of get this very hyper specific identity that's not very convenient in adult life, but is important at a young age. And so it's you really get this kind of like, okay, this is what we're into. We're very into this particular obscure idiom of music, and this is the kind of people I hang out with, and these are the shows that I go to.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And so it's like, it kind of reinforces your identity. But, you know, when I was in college and university, I met Austin Brown from Parquet Courts, and that was a phase when I was just pretty much strictly into hardcore and very aggressive and, you know, not listenable to most people kind of hardcore, you know. And Austin got me into a lot of like indie rock, you know. And indie rock that was like currently happening, because I knew like all the, like, you know, the indie bands that were appropriate for like a punk guy to like, you know, like New Order, and Joy Division, Smiths, you know, these were all acceptable. But then Austin was really into kind of, you know, current indie stuff that was going on, and some other people too, that I didn't wind up in bands with. But there, you know, I met people when I moved to Denton, Texas, to go to the University of North Texas, where I got a painting degree there. But mostly I played in a lot of bands, and you know, played a lot of like house shows. And I met a lot of people that were, you know, it was a cool kind of scene at the time in Denton.
It's just that I remember what I had this issue of identity. I remember one time at school, I must have been, I don't know, maybe 15 or so, and I was into I was into punk music, but I was also into some different stuff as well, in a kind of timid sort of way. But I you know, that sort of phase when you're a kid of writing you know, your favorite band names on your school bag and stuff like that. Yeah. And I remember seeing this guy who was a big guy, and he was a punk. He was into punk. He was into like Vice Squad and Anti-Noah League. It was that kind of, you know, kind of early 80s sort of punk. And I had my bag with, and I think it had like, you know, Crass, The Clash, and it had like Teardrop Explodes on as well. And I remember I was just like, oh fuck. And I saw him pick up my bag and just start laughing. And it's funny that, you know, those sort of times when those happen, and I can still remember that now, you know, kind of like sort of 40 years later or something like that. You know, I can still remember that time. It's never left me.
What did he have to say about your Clash and Teardrop Explodes?
He said what's this all about? And I played with them in the football team, right? And as
Uh,
well, so I kind of knew him, but he just
uh-huh.
and he said, you can't like, how can you like the Teardrop Explodes with the
Right.
Clash?
Yeah.
And I just was like, I do. Yeah,
I think that's a totally foreign experience to someone who's young and getting into music now, where
yeah,
those sort of you don't have to pick your tribe anymore. You used to really
absolutely.
just have to pick your tribe, and it's like, this is what
Yeah.
I do. But um, you know, we get people come out to see Parquet Courts that also listen to stuff on the radio, which, like,
Mm,
that a total no. Like, if you were anyone that was into any sort of alternative culture, it was boilerplate understood that the
mm,
radio fucking sucks, and that
yeah.
all the shit that they play on it is garbage. And that doesn't seem to like be the opinion. Like, the radio, like, it seems
Mm,
like top 40 music is actually kind of the coolest shit. I'm
the
not saying,
coolest.
but the impression that I get is that it is kind of, it serves the same function that, like, independent music once did for people. But you really
Yeah.
had to, like, pick your tribe, and and yeah, I mean,
It's
that's an experience that I think I was probably more on that big dudes. Like, I think I was probably more the enforcer kind
you're
of,
the,
uh but it's I mean, as you get older, that kind of shit just seems so petty and weird. And
it
you know
does,
what,
doesn't it?
that dude probably, like, like took acid a few years later and got into, like, Teardrop Explodes,
Yes, I hope that he had some kind of recollection of that experience. Anyway, but
Yeah.
it was it's funny that, isn't it? Because like it's almost like we, kind of society likes to we like to put things in boxes, and so like in music into kind of genres, and I got a bit of a thing about this, that it doesn't, but for me it doesn't work, because the music these days, I think, like you were suggesting, that it crosses over so much more, and that, kind of the influences that are available to people who are
Hmm.
creating music is so much more. And it's almost like that the experience that I had, and probably a lot of people is, I think still have that. We like to put things in boxes.
Hmm.
It helps us kind of understand it. And I don't know, maybe it's like kind of record stores, because it helps them put things into, kind of funk, soul, jazz, whatever.
Hmm.
But I think it's kind of limiting. And I've always sort of found that with Parquet Courts, that as well, that it's very difficult to, and I'm kind of quite glad about it, to put it into a particular genre.
Hmm. Yeah,
It
I guess
feels
so.
like it crosses.
Yeah. um Especially, yeah, in the last few years, like, I mean, I think it just kind of comes down to the fact that we are people with a lot of different influences, and we like a lot of
Mm,
different types of music, and so that, I think, naturally kind of informs the music we end up making.
mm. I mean, this sort of idea of a kind of experimental mindset, and the being open to trying new things, and not being kind of fixed in your kind of outlook.
Mm.
um Clearly, the band has benefited from that. I think it shows a, kind of like ongoing sort of evolution. Does it
Mm.
feel like that? Does it feel like that when you're there, or is it just kind of instinctive, the kind of the creation that's going on?
Does it feel like what exactly?
Kind of like it, like there's a specific kind of mindset, or is it just that this is who you are, you're just open to these different influences?
Yeah, it just ends up happening, really. I mean, it's there's not really like when we're making a record, like in the studio, there's not really like a ever a conversation of, like, a
Mm,
mission statement. It just kind of happens. It's just,
mm, mm,
albums to me are kind of these snapshots of an era
mm.
in an artist's life, I guess.
Yeah.
And in this case, 4 people. And it's kind of reflecting where they're at in their lives and the music that they're listening to and the kind of how they want to express themselves. And so all that kind of happens very organically. I look back at all of the records, and I can remember, those times, like you mentioned, kind of in the band on Sunbathing Animal. I remember very distinctly recording that record, and when I put that record on and listen to it, I am kind of transported back into that time in my life when I made it. And that's I think the function of music and art writ large for a lot of people, is that it's a portal. It's a portal to another time. Like we kind of use art to define history and to interpret history and to kind of understand what the psyche of someone living during the Second World War was. We interpret a lot of that through the art that was made by people then. And that is kind of that's kind of why the records end up being, they kind of when people listen to Parquet Courts records in the future, I would hope that they can act as a portal into the time that we made them. But certainly when I think back on making a record, I can definitely go back to that place when I made the record, and it's kind of a nice little kind of breadcrumb trail into the past. Like, oh yeah, I was thinking about this, I was going through this. I can specifically remember recording Sunbathing Animal, and it being the first time that we had made a record already having an audience. We had an audience, we had a expectation to fulfill, so to speak, and that was like the first time being cognizant of that, and the first time knowing that there were people that were looking forward to hearing this record, because that wasn't the case with Light of Gold, or certainly the first record, American Specialties.
How did that I mean, that expectation, did that have a positive effect? Or
on that record, on Something Animal? I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's a really cohesive record. I think it really does have a vibe to it, and all those songs really, I think, kind of belong together, and we really kind of we really focused on that, I think, on that record. So I think it paid off.
Because I guess that for some people, kind of like an expectation is sometimes a weight, but also
it was really intimidating to have it.
Was it? Actually. It was intimidating. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, I think that I was talking in fact, in the podcast that has just come out today, there's Kelsey Warren, who's with the band Black Emoji, was saying that he played in a classic sort of hard rock band, but there were these sort of urges to step outside of that and play, kind of sort of synth electronic pop, that kind of stuff. And it was almost like, I need to get over this obstacle, because he's I think people expect me to play this particular sort of style of music, but there's something inside me that's saying you need to kind of get out of this and play the stuff that's true to yourself.
Yeah, well, that's definitely true. I can relate to that, and I guess the band's evolution kind of speaks to that. I think there is a continuity in everything that we do, but I also think that with every step, maybe a step being an album, we're constantly evolving, and the records are kind of those are like the units of demarcation of change.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago about curiosity. That curiosity was sort of a big part of your life when you were younger. Is that you still have that kind of curiosity and sort of interest in finding out new things?
Yeah, and I think that is really, I mean, totally. When you're young, curiosity is, it's unavoidable. You have, because so much of the world is just dripping in mystery. and
Yeah.
meaning. And there's so much out there. So everything is so, you know, so significant. And but when you get older, things become increasingly more familiar. And I've traveled the world, and curiosity is not a thing that comes as naturally as it does when you're a kid. But I think it is an important muscle to keep flexing, is to continue being curious about things and continue investigating the meaning in things, because well, that's when you get old, I think, is when you stop being curious. And
stop being curious.
You start accepting everything kind of at face value, and you kind of get this, well, I've seen it all now kind of mindset. And that's when I think that kind of is the thing that, kind of leads to depression and ultimately feeling kind of lost and out of touch. And then, a lot of people, the kind of the vigor and enthusiasm they had in their youth kind of falls away, and so it's important to me to maintain that kind of curiosity, I think.
I mean, it becomes very obvious as well, doesn't it, that when people have lost that kind of vigor, that sort of curiosity. I mean, it's like you can't get away with it. I think people are kind of looking for this some way kind of like authenticity in the artist that they're listening to or watching, and people pick up on that if the artist isn't interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean when you have that you're thinking about that kind of curiosity, does that sort of come into your art as well, would you say?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I try to maintain as consistent of a creative schedule as I can, and I can drag myself to, the task if I need to. I try to, when I'm home, I try to be I'm a visual artist, so I have a studio. I try to drag myself there every day. I'll go up there after we're finished talking. And I try to make myself pick up a guitar like as often as I can, because I think one important thing is, if you're going to be a creative person, you have to always be kind of prepared for an inspiration to strike. It could happen at any moment, and so being in the habit of putting yourself in the situation for it to happen is an important thing, because then you kind of lose, if you don't, you risk kind of losing the muscle memory for it. And that's not that you won't be inspired again, but that maybe when inspiration comes, you're more passive about it, and you're not kind of giving it the space or the path to come to you. So yeah, it's a thing that curiosity, it's an important thing to maintain. It's I live in New York. I get the chance to look at a lot of good art here, and be surrounded by other great artists. It's a city that's not super hospitable to artists, but it is a good place to be an artist, because you're surrounded by a lot of fascinating, talented people.
I like your analogy with kind of curiosity as a muscle, and I think that I like that. And I think resilience is a sort of similar kind of like attribute as well. It's easy to for that to be worn down. I mean, kind of living in this world is extremely difficult and sort of complex now, and the kind of resilience that we need to kind of get through things is kind of super important. And think to kind of keep training those and thinking of them as muscles, to kind of keep kind of going and keep kind of pursuing things.
Yeah, I mean, I think curiosity is the basis of most artistic pursuits. So yeah, sometimes people ask me like, what advice do you have for me as a, you know, songwriter, artist, whatever.
Mm.
That would be a big one, I think. And also just to like, just keep going, just make yourself do it. If it's what you want to do, if it's what you love, uh, then keep doing it. Keep making yourself do it, and eventually you're going to get results that you like.
How do you kind of cope with kind of like when if that kind of creative flow is not working, or if there's something that you kind of make a mistake in something, kind of like pushing yourself to kind of get back into it and
Well, you just keep going. You just keep doing it because there's gonna be some bad days, or
Mm,
days
mm,
that are, I guess, maybe unfruitful. You don't come up with anything. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important to stay in the habit.
mm.
Uh, and I am kind of a person of routine, and um, I'm really interested in other artists, routines. But it's just something. A creative practice is just something that you really shouldn't take for granted, and just stay in the habit of it.
Mm, mm.
So if I have a bad day, I just tell myself that there's going to be a better one. If I just keep going. I mean, odds are that there's going to be something. I'll make something that I like. And that's just kind of, it is work. Being an artist, it is work that you have to work hard on. I think there's like this perception in culture now that I think might be something that's maybe exacerbated a bit by how instantaneous everything has become. We've become very impatient as people. You can have something delivered on Amazon one day, and it can get to you by the next day. In New York, you can have stuff delivered within a few hours to you. Um, the way that we watch television, you no longer have to wait the next week to see a new episode of a program. Watch all of them just at once. If you want to find a romantic partner, you can go look at so many of them in a miles or so radius from you. We've kind of gotten used to things happening immediately, and there's a perception that we people. I'm not on social media, but I get how it works. Like you see a lot of stuff on there. You see a lot of people share their art on there, and you see all this stuff being made. But I guess oftentimes what you don't see is the time and labor that went into that. And that's kind of one thing I like about records, or painting canvases, making physical art, certainly playing live, is because the labor and the time is all evident in that. Like when you walk up to a painting, you can see the brush strokes, you can see the time, you can see how someone labored over this. When you hold a record in your hands, you can see it was recorded at this studio on these dates, and this record wouldn't be possible without this list of people, and these people played on it. And so that reinforces this idea that people spent a lot of time. There's probably a lot of trial and error involved. There's probably a lot of editing involved. There were probably some songs that they thought were too crappy to make it on the record that didn't, but that's part of it. This instantaneous kind of low patience part of our culture, I could see how it would be easy for someone to give up, having been indoctrinated in that climate of instantaneous results, because art is not something that yields instantaneous results. It's something that you really have to be patient on. And it kind of gets, if you keep at it, like anything, like learning a language, like speaking a language, you kind of get better at it as you keep going. And that's, I think, it's important that people not give up when it doesn't always go to plan when it's not an instant success. I know people that, maybe they start doing something and it's not, they're not immediately good at it, so they give up, and I guess that's how I deal with it. When I have a bad day, I know that, if I keep going, eventually I'll get to where I want to be. Usually I do. I don't really abandon things that often. Hey, Giles, I can't hear you, pal. I think you might be, something happened to your audio, maybe. You're not muted, but.
I did. I muted the microphone. I think I must have got overexcited and sort of pressed the button when I shouldn't have done. I was going to say, I love the, I think you hit the nail on the head, about this kind of like instant gratification and sort of impatience, with things. I think it's totally right that we've become used to that. I fully see that. And, I remember I've been reading some books by Chomsky, and there was I think in his book on anarchy, he said he was explaining why he hasn't been asked to go on a particular news show ever, and the anchor of the news show had said that it's because you don't have concision. So basically, and he's like, of course I don't have concision. What I've got to say can't be said in a sentence of 6 words. And it's kind of like that, that things get shrunk and shrunk so that all that we kind of consume is either sort of instant or it's just in sort of small bite-sized pieces. With art, it whatever, whether it's, it's sort of painting, drawing or making music, it's just not like that as you exactly say, and it's interesting that this I guess kind of dichotomy of the way that music is consumed now on Spotify and Apple compared to the process that goes alongside it to actually kind of get it on there, so that it's a weird sort of dynamic now.
Yeah, and I'm not here to necessarily complain, because I benefit from a lot of these modern conveniences and a lot of this modern impatience I also have. And I also think it's cool that if I want to hear a record, I can listen to it.
You can,
right then and there. I don't have to go looking for it. When I first started getting in all these punk bands, and I would see like their ads in Maximum Rock and Roll, and I'd read the reviews of them, and hear about them word of mouth. Like I had to imagine what they sounded like. I had to imagine, even earlier than that, I had to imagine what Black Flag sounded like based on, these little kind of visual cues that I had about their sound. And there was this kind of magic in that period between learning about the band and then being like, I've got to hear that band. And then letting your imagination kind of go wild, and then finally tracking down a record or CD or whatever, and then that moment when you hear it, so that required, like, that was patience that we didn't even know we were exercising. Whereas now I think about, like, if I want to hear a record, I still hear it. I just like go to YouTube or Spotify or whatever, and I hear it, Bandcamp, and there's that process is totally gone. And I'm glad that I went through that and I experienced that, but I'm not necessarily like trying to recreate that, because I'm glad that I can hear something whenever I want, I do think it's interesting that, like, someone could be, intimately familiar with, the history of, Swedish black metal before they've ever heard Roxy Music, but that's kind of how it goes, that's
that's very true. I remember the like one of my early, I think I mentioned earlier, Killing Joke. One of my earliest gigs, I think one of the, maybe the sort of second or third that I ever went to was Killing Joke, back in a town sort of close to where I lived. And it was almost like with the records, like you say, you kind of like see the visuals, and then you see the album cover in the record store and think, okay, that looks really great, and then I've kind of read a little bit about them in kind of Sounds or NME or whatever the publication was.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of create this sort of image. And then when you see them live, it's like, whoa, it just sort of really kind of brings it together. I had the same with Jesus and Mary Chain as well. When I first heard them, when they first started, they were going through the stage of playing 20-minute sets. And it was exactly that. There was just a kind of brawl. They had a kind of row on stage and then sort of walked off. So it just sort of fitted exactly into what my expectations were at that time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wait, they were playing 20-minute sets?
Yeah. Right at the very start. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I can kind of get that from the Ramones, but that kind of surprises me about Jesus and Mary Chain.
Yeah, I think they. I don't know. I mean, whether it was this was a kind of thing, I don't know. But 20 minutes when they first started playing was almost like the norm. But yeah. So like as you kind of get older, do you do you I guess I'm thinking that generally a lot of people, I'm thinking more people in sort of paid jobs, that as they get older, the willingness to take risks and sort of push sort of boundaries kind of decreases. How do you feel about that?
I think maybe kind of the opposite. I was talking about meeting people's expectations when making Sunbathing Animal, but that really was the last time I really felt that. It was the first and last time, really. And I think that might be one of the reasons why the band is still doing what we're doing, is because we don't really take into consideration if people are going to like a record as much as they liked the last one.
Yeah.
And nor have we ever given any thought to trying to recreate whatever magic happened on the last one, And I think that that's been, so far, I think that that's served us well. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. I think that's, again, that's the sort of thing that I've heard about, that you need that to be able to, kind of keep on sort of moving forward. And another sort of area in that sort of same vein is with collaborations. Of course, your Milano album was, with collaborators on there.
Well, in that case, we were the collaborators. That's a Daniel Lupi record that we contributed to.
That you contributed to.
Yeah, I don't consider that to be a Parquet Courts record. It's definitely not. It's a Daniel Lupi record, but we were we contributed to it. And yeah, it was just, that thing was just like, it was so, because of that, it was just so low stakes for us that we just kind of studio and just kind of fucked around with them, really.
Yeah. What did that? That experience of being the collaborator. What did that? What do you think that kind of gave you and the band?
Like I said, a sense of, it was low stakes because it wasn't ours. I think a lot of people interpret that record as being one of our records, but it's really his. But so just because it wasn't ours, like, it was like, well, if this totally flops, it's not on us. It's it's a Daniel Lupi record, but it ended up being really fun, and we had like a lot of fun in the studio. And there wasn't really like songwriting happening. It was more just kind of just making the wackiest sounds possible and letting him sort out how to turn those into songs.
Yeah. Nice one. Brilliant. Well, listen, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking time off, especially as you're kind of like in the middle of a tour after so long. And
sure thing.
Yeah. Thanks so much, and best of luck with the rest of it, and hopefully see you in the UK sometime soon.
You absolutely will. You'll see us. I don't know where you live, but it'll be in June. We'll be over there
in June. Okay, perfect. Yeah. I'm in London, so we'll definitely catch up.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Giles.
Andrew. All the best. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show, and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.